Hi, my name is Mubina Raza. I will be your host this morning, and we will be having a conversation around measuring outcome and impact in the landscape of equity. Some ground rules. We appreciate if you can remain on camera. I know a good amount of people signed up for this session, so we're looking forward to having the conversation, getting to know you a little bit better. Ready to participate. This is going to be an interactive session. We will be presenting two things, a QR code when it's time for you to engage, and also a link with a number, so that you can, if you're logging in from your machines, your computers, you are able to use that link with that combination of code, and you are able to participate in the questions and the scenarios. Let's avoid distractions, and please raise your hand if you have any questions. We'll try to go through the questions as we together as we work through this entire session. If there are any questions that are left, we would love to circle back and follow up. So let us know if you're speaking, and when you're done speaking, please let's come up with one phrase, such as "I'm done" or "I'm complete," so that we know that the other person can speak up, or we can take the mic back. I'll try to be mindful about creating this space and request the same from you. Let's be mindful about our airtime. If you are uncomfortable like me, grabbing a squeegee normally helps. And let's create grace for yourself and for each other. And those are some of the ground rules. Any questions on those? Sounds good. There are two aims that we're coming to you with from this session. There's a rationale aim, something tangible that you walk away with, right? For example, learn the essentials, walk away with some of the tools about measuring equity, how to leverage the equity hub that the organization is putting together for you, what that states, how we're going to utilize that going forward, and some of the experiential aims. For example, what you walk away with, how did you feel during the conversation? Was it engaging? Did you feel empowered at the end of it? So with that, I'm going to request us to engage. When you're joining this session, what do you want to walk away with? So if you can scan the QR code or join slido.com with that number at the bottom, you will be able to go in and answer. And as our answers come together, there is going to be a word cloud that's going to form over here that shares what people do want to walk away with. What's the max that they want to, what's the highest engagement that they want to get out of this one? And what are some of the things that some other people are passionate about? Play. Measuring equity, performance measurement for equity, resources, applications, understanding, information, ideas for KPIs. There are some topics I'm going to state that we covered today, and then there are some that we're going to walk away with, that's what people wanted to know, so that we can next time come back. Understanding, information, reporting, that's another good one. Great awareness from one set. Equity indicators. People who are just joining, that there is a QR code on the screen. This is going to be an interactive session. There's a QR code on the screen. You can scan it with your phone and answer the question in 1 or 2 words, describe what you want to walk away from this session. Or you can join us by slido.com, and there's a number at the screen. Thank you for that. So the top 3 ones that I'm that is forming over here is accountability, information, understanding, equitable indicators, tool for PEAR, continuous improvement, reporting, improved knowledge. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate the engagement. Love that engagement. Thank you so much. Some of the topics that we'll be covering today, some we'll be walking away with to share with you in the next coming sessions. Why is it critical to measure, right? So I'm going to ask for another engagement. Out of the equity, diversity, and inclusion, if you can scan the next QR code or go to slido.com and enter that number, out of equity, diversity, and inclusion, what is the most difficult one to measure from a measurement standpoint? So when you have that question in front of you, if you're going to, whatever is the top most difficult one, in your opinion, if you click that one first and then go down the list and as the ranking. And it'll take 1 minute for this engagement. Thank you for that. So again, based on our different experiences, diversity is mostly about, not only about head count, but mostly about the physical appearance of when we can count that easily. Inclusion and equity are two of the most difficult one to measure. So again, going back to the polling that we just did, diversity is what seems like is the easiest to measure and calculate and see. But inclusion and equity are the ones that are a little bit difficult to see, to measure, right? Why? Because it's based on specifically equity, which is based on our lived experiences, how something makes us feel. It's each individual's perspective. It's about feeling. It's about empathy. It's about love. It's that felt experiences. And when we talk about equity work, which most of us do, and we are passionate about, it is emotional work. It is bringing those individual felt experiences, those lived experiences into the space, asking, leaning into difficult conversation, asking those difficult topics that might be emotional to work through, and then coming up with policies, with processes, with budgeting, with options to make and create an equitable space for everybody to work and thrive. And it's a never-ending work, right? It's always going, it's a continuous work. There is not going to be the day that we say, okay, we are a pro equity organization. We are a organization that we don't have any work to do towards equity or a state. It's a lifelong work. So let's talk about the equity data principles, right? From the equity hub standpoint that the department is putting together for us to leverage. Right now, we don't have that ready, but that's coming, and we'll give you some of the preview of that. What equity data principles that we're talking about, they are about data privacy, protection, data sovereignty, demographic and disagreeing data, right? So it's community-based practitioner research. It's result-based accountability, which is leveraging result-based accountability for the state of Washington Office of Equity is defining the vision of racial just and equitable future and designing the means to reach that goal, right? So Executive Order 2204 outlines that Washington's 15 determinants of equity, which the goal is to eliminate disparities in terms of access, in terms of practice and procedures, quality of service, and programs in these 15 determinants of equity correlate to better outcomes for people and Washingtonians, where all of us can thrive. And equity must be achieved in all 15 of those determinants to build and sustain true belonging, equity, and justice for all. Let's talk about how do we measure. We are going to do another interactive exercise. If you can, turn on your cameras. I appreciate that. What we're going to do is, can you put your hands together that when you're ready to do your prayers? Now let's move our hands apart. Sorry, make a note of what thumb is at the top when you initially put your hands together. For me, it's my left thumb, right? So now when I move my hands apart, I'm going to bring my hands back together, but this time I'm going to put my other thumb at the top. So for me, I'm going to put my right thumb at the top, and we are going to hold this posture for 1 minute. Make a note of how you're feeling during this 1 minute. And since we are holding this posture, let's go ahead and go back to the Slido interaction. And in that chat, can you put what you felt during that minute or half a minute to a minute holding that opposite way of your natural way of holding your thumb? Odd, uncomfortable, unnatural, tense, anxious, awkward. Slightly uncomfortable. Thumb war. It felt wrong. It felt sleepy. For some, it felt relaxed. So the reason we did this exercise is I wanted to bring back the change management, that it's a slight change. It's just a part of our body that we are normally, without intentional, that we hold our hand in a certain way. And when we were forced to do it in a different way, or when we were asked to do it in a different way, it felt awkward. It felt uncomfortable. It felt tense. It felt like a thumb war. It felt trapped, and you want to break out of that. That is change management, right? It's such a slight change, yet it's difficult. So change management, no matter how hard, how impactful, how large it is uncomfortable. It is. So when we are starting this conversation, we acknowledge that no matter how slight the change is, or how large or how bigger of the impact it's going to bring, it is still awkward. It's still uncomfortable. And we are aware of that. We are leaning into that discomfort. Thank you for that engagement. With that change management, I do want to talk about establishing baseline on the when we are talking about equity work, that we do talk about establishing a baseline. Just like in any GPS, when we are destined for a location, in our GPS, we have to put our starting point. We have to put where we started from, what was our initial starting point, or I am here and I want to go to this distance. That only then we are able to measure the distance, how long it's going to take us to get there, what route we should be taking, and what's the best way to do it. Same applies to the equity work, right? So we have to establish a baseline of where we are today, so that when we 6 months down the road, a year down the road, 5 year, 10 year down the road, we are able to look back and see how far we have come. What was our base starting point? Did we improve the changes that we made, the policy that we brought, the funding that we allocated to a certain thing? Did that bring in the impact? Did that bring in the change that we wanted to see, or did it worsen what we were striving for? And how do we course correct? It's like, and same goes, it applies to the equity impact review initiative for your PEAR strategic plan, right? So that's what it talks about, providing direction on it gives you a 5-step process to blend qualitative and quantitative data to achieve equitable access to opportunities and resources that reduces the disparities and improve equitable outcomes statewide, right? It addresses an all-inclusive relational partnership approach that brings affected communities, agency leaders, our employees, and all the interested parties together at one table for advancing pro-equity and racial justice access and belonging work. Do you see there are 2 chats? Establishing baseline, because this is equity work, there are two type of tools to measure it, qualitative and quantitative. So we're first going to talk about the qualitative one, because equity is that feeling of belonging that you only get from community voices and lived experiences, right? So for equity baseline metrics, we have to start with the tools such as surveys, focus group, case studies, in-depth interviews, together that lived experiences, ethnographic studies, and PEAR requires agencies to invite communities to conduct qualitative research. For the qualitative research, the questions have to be designed around the techniques from philosophy. You can engage certain organization that can design those questionnaires for you, those surveys, so that we are able to bring in people to a comfortable state where they are sharing their lived experiences, and we are creating a belonging state where we are taking those initiatives and then converting them into quantitative numbers so that we can measure the impact. And those questionnaires, those surveys, those in-depth interviews, they can be designed around psychology, neuroscience, communication, delivery, and adoption methodology. So there are firms out there that we can leverage that can draft those questionnaires, those in-depth interviews, those contents, those narrative, so that we can build on top of that. There are also quantitative data gathering tools available, right? So Gini coefficient and tile index, both of them talk about from the budgetary standpoint, income inequalities. But then if we look at the coefficient of variation, that talks about the relative variable of data sets which can be applied to, to assess disparities in various contexts. There's another tool, concentration index, that's often used in the healthcare industry to assess inequalities in the distribution of health services. PALM ratio, it takes the top 10% and the bottom 40%, but then focus on the middle income inequalities. Regression analysis, another one, it's a statistical analysis that measure the impact of various factors, for example, race, gender, income, and such outcomes related to equity. Any questions? I know I talked a lot, so I'm going to create this space for us to have this conversation in a co-engagement way. So if you can please raise your hand, unmute yourself, and share your thoughts and your experiences around qualitative, quantitative, or baseline data. I am going to hold this awkward silence. So one of you need to unmute and speak on the topic. Is that something that you guys are moving towards, or you're thinking about, you're leaning into, or you have not started the work and you are looking at different ways to establish that baseline?
I'll say something. I think some of these tools are new to me in terms of, a lot of us don't necessarily work in the data side of things, or at least I don't. And so a lot of the ways that we establish the baseline are more on the qualitative side. And in addition, I think part of the issue is like funding sources to like actually create a baseline and time, because there's so much urgency to like address issues. And so anyways, those are the things that just came to my mind as you're going through the tools.
Thank you so much, Tara. That's great. And that's what we want to identify, right? How do we support establishing the baselines, where the need is, and going forward, how do we meet those needs? Gabrielle shared in the chat, I haven't started the work and I'm still thinking about how to start. Thank you for sharing that. Go ahead.
I have one more question for you. In terms of like, so what are some resources that we can pull from to start a baseline that already exists, instead of, like obviously we can do some of our own research and our own data gathering, but I'm just curious if there's like things that already exist that fall into these categories that would be helpful for folks just starting out.
So I am going to, can I?
I'm worried it's going to cause feedback if I unmute.
Okay.
But I can tell you, I don't know if they can hear me.
Okay.
So we are going to be launching our Equity Hub soon, which will give us broad baseline analysis for certain determinants. And I think what folks can do now is actually start to think about which of the determinants of equity their work directly or indirectly impacts.
Thank you for that. Yes, so Equity Hub, which we are going to touch base on today, is one of the tools that's available, and we're going to go through 15 determinants and what the measuring factor is that will bring that broader vision and large bowl of spaghetti to a smaller bite-sizable chunks that we can just pick one and start working on that. Because this is all the departments come together, and the community and impacted employees and public, right? So what are some of the things that in your area that you serve the public that you can start the conversation from? So when we go through further down this presentation, when we go through those 15 determinants of equity, what you can do is just look into it, which one applies to your department, and which one impact the public that you serve? And let's start from that. That's a great question, and I think in our further conversations we will definitely lean into those items. Andrew shared, same, I'm thinking about what and how my program need to start measuring to measure our success, right? Will the slides and a recording be available after the session? Yes, the recording and the slides will be available after the session. Leaning into the conversation that we're coming from previously, Washington, right? A belonging state. And we have been talking about Equity Hub, which is in making. We had intention to launch it at this time, but we could not. But it's roughly 90% done, and that's a tool that will be shared with you, and we'll go through that today. Equity Hub primarily identifies the 15 determinants of equity conditions in Washington, right? So you should use that Equity Hub as a strategic decision-making tool, like some of you were asking. Start with identifying the determinant of equity that any specific agency directly or indirectly impacts while we are going through that one, right? Assess the map and the data visualization to understand where the needs are greater. That's another thing that will be available. Define strategic goals that invest in the people and the places where needs are greatest. And then commit to those goals by adding them to agencies' PEAR strategic plan, action items, and decision-making. Could 15 determinants of equity be shared in the chat? I think we can. Okay, so these are the 15 determinants of equity. Health, built and natural environment, early childhood development, quality education, food system. That one falls under community support system. So these 15 determinants of equity, they are grouped under 4 different categories. Under community support system, you have these. Under family support system, that the determinants under there are community and public safety, health and human services, housing and home ownership, strong, vibrant neighborhoods, parks, recreation, and natural resources. Under community infrastructure, economic justice, digital equity, justice system and law, transportation and mobility, job and job-based trainings. Last but not the least, the government policies, practices, people and systems, equity in state and local government. Kitty, do you have, is there anything that I need to be mindful of in the chat?
No, I'm
okay.
I'm following up in chat.
Okay.
But for these determinants of equity, some of these would be better defined.
Some, yeah.
Some of these we're still working with agencies across the enterprise to define them.
Love that. Thank you for that. So I'm going to hone in a little bit more on the on all those 4, right? So under community and support system, the results that we're looking for is healthy built and natural environment for all people that include mix of land use that support jobs, housing, amenities and services, trees and forest canopies, clean air, water, soil, and sediment. For right now, the way we are looking into and just like what Katie said, that there are some that we have outlined, few guiding principles, but then the others that we are still not sure. We are inviting departments into those active conversations and co-creating the determinants and how to measure them, right? So under community and support, there were 4, which is health, built and natural environment. The measure that we are looking for is that mix of land, the mixes of land use, trees and forest canopies, exposure to toxins, clean air, water, soil and sediment. And then under childhood development, the measures that we are looking at right now is nurturing relationships, high quality early childhood development, affordable, high quality early childhood development, and then school readiness. Under quality education, the measures that we are looking for is like high quality education, cultural appropriate education, learning potential, discipline rates, career potential, and staying under that larger canopy of community support system, food systems, like how do we measure local food production, food access, and food affordability for Washingtonians.
There's a bit of a conversation going on in chat right now.
Okay.
About when we can use qualitative versus quantitative data. For instance, how do you quantify strong, vibrant neighborhoods? And I'd love for us to talk a bit about that.
Sounds good. So great, right? How do we quantify strong, vibrant neighborhoods? It comes down to felt experiences. Do they feel engaged? Do they feel that specific neighborhood, or the results, that the qualitative interviews or surveys, or the voices of that specific community that we are inviting to the table, are they bringing back some of the issues that those neighborhoods are feeling? And then we convert that into, we start from a qualitative reviews, and then we convert into that this is the measuring factor that people did not feel safe, or there was a number of some maybe kids were not graduating from high school. There are other factors around it, right? So how do we, over the years, what did we do to make that impact? How we brought in those voices from that specific neighborhood or community, and engage them into what their need is? How do we put the funding in that, and then measure that, go back and do the survey the next year and see how the funding or allocation that we did in that specific neighborhood, did we hear from the people who are actually there that they did see the impact? And those impacts can be measured on, right? If they say, I feel safe in this neighborhood, from 1 to 5%, if it's a 2%, and next year it's 2.5%, that's somewhat progress. Or if it goes down to 1.5%, then we need to determine and see, what do we need to do different? I'm going to open it up for the conversation. Is there anything else that you have seen or experienced, anyone from the audience, that you have seen worked in your areas, in your department, that you did and made an impact? I'm sure there are stories out there.
Hi, this is Noemi. I have my hand raised, but I don't know if you can see that because of how sometimes Zoom works.
Thank you for unmuting and speaking up.
Yeah, so I work at Department of Services for the Blind, and I think one of the things that also really, and also I used to be in higher ed. I have my education degree was in Latin American studies. So I'm bringing all of that to the table to say that in my both academic, state work, and lived experience, so all of these experiences, one of the things which is sort of looked at in this chart, but it's not spelled out, is that people need to recognize themselves in the instrument. You know, if people do not see the questions of identification or the questions of why is this important, or how is this about you, and we see that because we're doing a lot of pair work with some of our program participants at DSB for them to talk about barriers to access, and we want to hear from communities that do not necessarily are served well by our agency as what PEAR is. we are thinking about how to ask these questions so that people see themselves reflected in the instrument, and they say, oh, this is about me. This is not an instrument of, survey about, are you happy with the services, which of course it's really important, but some underrepresented populations feel that if I'm going to be doing all of this work, is it really going to benefit me or my community? So it's about also designing the instrument in a way that people feel recognized. And I'm just going to share a small, very, very small anecdote, because those of you who know me know I'm all about anecdotes, just so that you can see an example. So in my higher ed equity officer posting, we did a survey because, as many of you know, and this was not in Washington State, so I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but we did a study because in higher ed, people who identify as women are paid less at the same rank as people who are identified as men. And so we wanted to talk to employees and students, everybody at the institution, faculty, staff, students, around gender equity. And because I also come from LGBTQ plus activism, I wanted people to self-identify as male, female, non-binary. And I had a lot of conversations with female stakeholders that felt that, and this was at an earlier time, and again, it's complicated. They felt that if this was going to be about women's rights, they only wanted people to talk about what it means to be a woman. And again, I was trying to explain that for the student population in that historical moment, not all of the people who were assigned female at birth identify as women, but some of them are affected by pay equity. So all of this to say in that we had a 5-hour conversation about the initial box on how people identify so that we would have the maximum people feeling comfortable filling out the survey as something. Because again, if you are coming into the survey as somebody who doesn't identify as a woman, what's in it for you, right? So again, all of this to say in that all these determinants of equity are amazing, and I totally agree with them, but we also need to be very careful about designing our instruments so that people feel reflected. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Love that. Thank you so much for that. Very important conversation. And that's why if for the peer engagement, that peer strategic plan, it's specifically called out that we just don't provide the whatever we assume that the community need, and we come up with the solutions, that there's a specific call out for relationship building and bringing those people from the community, those voices at the table. So when we are going out to do the survey, their voice is heard, there is representation at the table, that when we are coming up and creating those policies, that they are engaged, that they are involved, that they are part of those policies, and we are reaching out and bringing those people who are not heard. There are people don't know what they don't know. It's, again, responsibility falls on us to have our leadership at the table, our employees, our middle and top level management, along with the voices from the public sector. All of them at the table is what's going to be a cohesive policy that is going to actually bring the impact. Thank you for that conversation. There was a lot to unpack in there. So we'll take a break. We'll come back and discuss further. We have 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
5-10 minutes, yeah.
5 minutes, and we'll circle back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Where's the remote? Zoom in. I am unmuted. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So we are back from a break. I hope you had a chance to stretch, drink some water, take some bio break, and come back ready to have the conversation further. Out of the 4 categories for the 15 determinants of equity, second one is that family support system, right? These determinants support strong individuals and family systems and community investments that help people grow and flourish. Under this one, the top the 5 determinants are community and public safety, health and human services, housing and home ownership, strong, vibrant neighborhoods, parks, recreation, and natural resources. Under each one of them, there are some measures that we have identified. And when you are going to see all of this at the Equity Hub, under those measures, there's a detail about how to calculate those measures and what are the success indicators. So for today, we'll only talk about the measures under each one of the determinants of equity. So under community and public safety, the 2 measures that we are looking into is community participation of safety and then actual safety. Under health and human services, the measures that we are taking into account is high quality service, accessible and affordable service, cultural appropriate services, and optimal well-being. Under house and home ownership, the measures are safe, high quality housing, affordable housing, healthy housing, and accessible housing. Under strong, vibrant neighborhoods, the measures that we are looking for are strong social networks, neighborhood cohesion, and civic vitality. Parks, recreational, and natural resources, the measures that we are taking into account are safe, clean space, quality of outdoor space, facilities, and activities. The third category is community infrastructure. So these determinants fortify and distribute opportunity through support system, families, and communities. There are 5 determinants under this category: economic justice, digital equity, justice system and law, transportation and mobility, job and job training. So the measures under economic justice are local ownership of assets, business development retention. Under digital equity, the measures are digital accessibility, equitable access to digital utilities, equitable use of emerging digital technologies. Under justice system and law, the measures are equitable access and fair treatment. Under transportation and mobility, the measures are safe transportation, efficient, convenient, reliable transportation, and affordable transportation. Under job and training, the measures are availability of living wage job, poverty and wealth. On each of the slides, you might have noticed I have on the right-hand side the measures. So the way that we have it designed on our Equity Hub is that right here in this area, every determinant will have what's the significance, how do you define it, what's the data strategy, what's the methodology, what's the source, what's the frequency, what's the limitation, what are our findings, and what are action items that we need to take. So under each of those 15 determinants, these are the categories that we have. So when you get to Equity Hub, you will be able to leverage that resource. the last but not the least is the government policies, practices, people, and systems, right? So strong investment in governmental policies, practices, people, and systems, which is aligned with the PEAR service offering, nourish a pro-equity and anti-racist system. There is only one measure that we have, determinant we have in there, is that equity in state and local government. We do have to further expand on this, and that's where, when Katie was talking about bringing departments and public together and further developing what's the significance, how do we define it, what's the data strategy, how do we measure baseline source frequency, what's the limitations, what are our findings, and then document based on those findings what actions we need to take. Thank you, Tara, for sharing that social vulnerability index. Just like Katie shared, that some of this work is already in motion at various agencies, and we will link to a dashboard and map already created by other agencies. With that, I want to hold the space for people to unmute, share, and if you have any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, we would love to address that and create the space and open the floor for anybody to share their opinion.
I'm just super excited. This is Kat Cook from the HCA. I am super excited about this because I spend a not small portion of my time searching for proxies for whatever I'm supposed to be forecasting. So this is just, I am just giddy about this. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Katie, you want to say something? One thing I would love to share here at this space is that Katie and her team, they hired a good amount of staff in the last 30 days. And this session and all this work that you're seeing here is the production of that team that came together in the last 30 days. Instead of storming and norming, they just got onto the work and made this possible. So kudos and credit goes to them.
Way to go, state workers doing that. Bonus.
Thank you, Katie. That was super appreciated. And yes, there is a lot coming and there's a lot of work happening. So we look forward to engagement from all of us. I would love to lean into the art of possibility now. That's the last topic that I have, is that structural approach. When we lean into, this is, again, equity work is emotional work. We do want to jump in. We want to just hit the ground running. We want to lean into this work as soon as possible. But if we do not step back and establish structural approach, we have seen in 15, 20 years of history from different organizations that when those initial baselines are not set, when that structure is not in place, almost always that work falls apart. Because, and there are a few ways that will walk through suggestions that you can adopt to establish that framework, right? You can start within your department, start with establishing committees or subcommittees. There's a specific group of people who are going to come together. This is the type of work that they are going to intentionally do. Maybe it's data and analytics. Maybe it's one of the engagement with the public, and that group bring back some of the initiatives that you can take as in the next 12 months as low-hanging fruit. That's something that you can go after, and something that you can accomplish in the next 5 years and just start moving in that direction, right? So define your charter, bylaws. What does a specific committee do? How long is the term? When you're going to choose your new chair or co-chair? How do we deliberate towards the decision-making process? With committees, then you engage into the rules of engagement, right? Establish group norms, agreements, establish the perspective of lifelong learning. It's not a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It's a lifelong work. It is a continuous work, always improving without a final journey. How does that specific group, when they come together, how are they going to relate to one another? how they're going to communicate towards decision making, right? When there is an impasse or somebody who's showing up in a way that's detrimental to the group, how are you going to continue to keep on moving forward? So that structure in place is doing that work up front is going to help us in the long run and allow us to keep on moving forward. Clearly defined policy creation process, right? So equity work is mainly policy work. People normally say it's not the fun work, it's not the sexy work of the DEI, it's the policy work, it's the budgetary work, it's the processes, implementation type of work. So upfront, right? How are you going to, what type of policies are going to be, you're going to create, and you know, what's the process? Is it something that needs to be within your department? Is it something that needs to go at the ledge level? Is it something that needs to go to the you know, equity, larger equity group? How do you identify, again, your baselining? What's your lowest hanging fruit? What's something that you're going to go after in the next 12 months? Because there's a huge amount of improvement that you can make, but honing in into few top 2 or 3 is going to be the key, right? And then you analyze, is that policy, do we already have something in written? Do we need to just improve that? Or do we come up with a totally new one? What's the development? Who's going to write it? Who's going to proofread it? Is there technical legal jargons that we have to be mindful of? Who's going to approve that? And then we go through the enactment process. Whether, if it's improved, what's the implementation training process going to look like? If it's not improved, we go back to the drawing board, right? So you clearly define those policies. And then the next one is that create not safe space, but brave space. The term safe space relies to a place, you know, intended to be free of bias, conflict, criticism, or potentially threatening actions, ideas, and conversations. Versus for equity work, we have to lean into discomfort. We have to lean into, by default, brave space is designed to handle discomfort. People within them are prepared to exit in discomfort and still navigate through it, still move towards a positive outcome, and leaning into that discomfort, difficult conversations is what's going to get us to move forward and continue to move forward. University of Maryland identifies 6 pairs of brave space, 6 pillars of brave space. First is vulnerability, right? We do this by asking the question about like things we don't understand, sharing parts of our story so that the complexity of who we are frames the context of our comments. Second is that, perspective talking. We do this by listening to understand, not just by intent of listening to respond. We lean into fear. We do this by, reframing our mindsets about fear. Do we let the fear hold us back and miss on the opportunities for change, or we let the fear propel us and we move in the direction of change and growth? Critical thinking, when we come together, all of us in that same space, we do this by not taking critique as a personal attack, but by seeing it as a way to expand our way of thinking. We examine our own intentions, right? We ask the question to our own selves that, what am I about to share? Is it for the purpose of advancement, dialogue, or is it for my own self-serving, right? What are the reasons for my actions? What do I want to see happen as a result of what I'm about to share, or the words I'm about to utter, or the action I'm about to take? And then being mindful, slow down, pause before reacting. And by enacting on the rest of the 5 pillars, we do on the tools page, we do have this specific 6 pillar brave space worksheet, the link to that. Any questions, comments on that? Hearing none, I'll move to the next one and you can come back to questions and comments. Another thing that we need to do is that because people are volunteering to come in and do this equity work together with all of us, is that do we create the space in their working hours, right? We are not asking our staff to do this work in after hours when it's their family time. That if we are doing this work, are we creating space and time for our staff to do this work? Are we designating, say, for example, a chair and a co-chair? If they're going to meet once a month, they're going to come prepare for the meeting for 1 hour. They're going to engage in the meeting for 1 hour, and then they're going to do, work. So maybe 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours for chair and co-chair, because they're going to set the agenda and send the notes and all of that. And then people who are coming in as volunteer, our employees, our staff who's coming in and volunteering their time, do we work with their supervisor and designate, or their manager and designate the 2 hours out of each month that they will be doing. There's a pre-work or a homework that they need to do, and being a part of that meeting, that's 1 hour, and it's part of their work day, and we're not asking our staff to do this work in their off hours, right? So designating that time is going to be another area that we can lean into. Another one is, I'm a big opponent of training, right? So when we are coming together in this emotional work, in these hard conversations, we can train at least chair or co-chair in something like technology of practice, right? That it's called Top Core Methodology Service. It's a powerful collection of structured facilitation methods that transforms the way the group talks, the group think, and work together. So there are three different workshops. There is a focused conversation method. It's normally used for shared understanding, like a dialogue, right? We all agree on this one, leaning into that harder conversation. There's a consensus building workshop, which is we take these different opinions, then we come up with, we do a consensus building workshop that all of us come together and we build consensus that that's where we are going to lean into, or that's what we are going to do, right? It's a shared agreement. And then the third methodology that top technology of practices offer is that action planning process. What actions we need to take, what's the shared action we need to take, and how we are going to move forward. So these are 3 different types of workshops that facilitation around the dialogue, around action, and around shared agreements. So if we bring somebody to train our chairs and co-chairs, so we empower them to have create these spaces and have the dialogues and keep the work continuously moving forward. I think that's the last of Art of Possibility. I would love to hear from any of you and all of you about what your thoughts are. Is that something that you can you see that you can adopt? Is that something that you would love to lean into or know further about?
I think it's no.
So this is Susan. When you're describing these various ways to come into agreement, like shared understanding, agreement, and action, are there going to be supporting webinars or workshops for us to bring our teams into to bring this framework into being and how we work?
So that is an idea that, yes, we need to, we are working towards funding and budgeting so that we can train our staff and empower all of you so that we can establish these workshops. We can bring the trainers in that train all of you so that you can go back to your departments and do the amazing work.
And part of this is understanding where the needs are for agencies so that we can target our resources.
And Carrie is sharing that part of it is going to be you identifying the needs where the needs are so that we can allocate the resources.
lots of positive feedback.
Human-centric design, art of hosting, participatory leadership, all are examples of the type of facilitation being mentioned. Couldn't agree more. And equity work is people work, right? It is emotional work. It's leaning into those hard conversations. I am going to hold awkward silence for another minute, creating the space for somebody else who want to unmute and share. Or if you have any questions. This was the last of our I do have the last slide with some of the tools that I shared today, and I'm open for questions. Kelly, go for it.
We have a hand raised in chat.
Please unmute and go for it.
Hi. Sorry, could you go back to your slides, one of the slides for the framework that shows the measures?
Of course. Let me go back to the one that has all the 15 measures, this one.
Mm-hmm. And then the next few slides have like the subcategories, right?
Right, yeah, okay. So, so this one is around the community and support system. So the one of the 4 categories. Let me know where you want me to stop.
This is good, right? This
Okay.
is a good example. So I guess I'm sorry if I missed this when you were
All right, please.
describing these slides. So when we get down into these subcategories, is the Office of Equity going to be, or is part of the work like operationalizing these measures and saying, so when we say strong social networks, we're talking about measuring these kinds of, say, 3 to 5 things, so that when I'm looking at a dashboard that aggregates all of this, I have a sense of like how this was measured and whether it was kind of measured the same way among different efforts or different agencies or different places. So is there going to be some more like specific guidance about what kind of indicators show neighborhood cohesion or safety or and so on?
Yeah, so right at the top, if you look at the right-hand side, allow me to take my cursor there. Right here in this area is the structure that each of these 15 determinants that we are talking about. Right over here on this slide, I just put very specific measures, but when you log into the Equity Hub, there is, for each indicator, there is a what's the significance, right? What's the definition of this specific measure? What is the data strategy? What's the methodology we use to gather the baseline? What's the source we used? What was the frequency? What were the limitations that we ran into? And then go down to then what are our findings? And what are some of the action items that we can take? And that's the work where we need to co-create instead of just, Office of Equity providing that they need to provide the guidance, but it has to be a partnership, a co-creation of how we can make this better.
Right. Thanks. Yes, you did go over that before and I just didn't absorb it. Thank you.
No, I'm glad you asked. We still have time and we are at QAA. I'm glad you asked. That might have clarified it for other people too. Tina, please go for it.
Yeah, so I have kind of the same question around this, and I know that you're going to partner with individual agencies, but I'm wondering if the Office of Equity has determined some numerators and denominators for these specific measures that are common across all agencies, so that we could benchmark across agencies or even within a collection of agencies so that we're all looking at similar dashboards. I see why folks are asking that. If we all have different numerators and denominators, then our metrics are kind of almost handpicked. They're not really a benchmark across the agency of how we're doing on certain things. So that was my question. Is
hand
there
it over
going to
to
be
Katie.
standardization in that?
Can Mike, please?
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Sorry, get back.
Okay. Okay. We're muted. No feedback. So I'm distracted now. Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, so is the Office of Equity working on any standard numerators or denominators for each of these 15 determinants so that they can be measured across all state agencies, as opposed to having bespoke data sets for every single different agency?
Sure, that is the long-term goal. Of course, that is difficult with our data sharing policies and our data privacy policies. So part of what we're doing is trying not to recreate work that's already been done by other agencies because they put so much effort into it already. And we will be trying to pull all of these resources together in the Equity Hub to start, and then collaborate with each other to come to a consensus on what those measures should or could be. And in relation to that question, Fred Wade also asked, are all agencies going to be required to adopt all 15? The 15 determinants of equity are what we have defined as what somebody living or residing in Washington need to thrive. So no, not all agencies are going to have a direct impact on all 15 of these determinants of equity, but you may have a direct or indirect impact on them. And so defining which ones your agency directly impacts is going to be really important, so that we can connect folks with each other to move forward together. Those that you indirectly impact, you may still want to be involved in those conversations, because when you look at things with an equity lens, sometimes you find that what you're doing in your agency actually impacts several other determinants of equity. So that is something that we will help guide you through, either through the Equity Hub or ongoing workshops throughout the year. So I hope that I've answered your questions. Please jump in and let me know if I have not.
Yeah, so you did mention that if we're talking about perception of safety, is the Office of Equity going to determine what data sets we're going to be looking at for perception of safety, like across different? I guess the answer is probably we don't know yet. I think that's probably what the answer is. And then my other question is, so if you are looking long-term, that yes, we want to have similar data available across agencies, and then we narrow it down and then it gets more specific. Do you have a timeline of when you expect that work to be available for agencies, as far as a standardization, so that I could share that with my leadership?
Well, right now I'm the only person on my team, so I don't have an actual timeline for you, but we're actively hiring.
Cool.
And then once I have the staff on board that can help really move this forward, then we can talk about timelines more specifically. Right now I'm focused on the Equity Hub and getting our team staffed up.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Hi, I wanted to make a comment. My name is Felipe Rodriguez Flores, he, him. I work in the Washington Department of Health, and this is just such a fantastic workshop, amazing work. It's great to hear about it. Thank you for, having this session and presenting all this information. I just wanted to share that I'm working on an equity assessment process for my team in my program, and you know, there's different kinds of equity assessment methods. I found one from the Department of Health and Human Services, and I'm gonna share it in the chat. But it really invites us to basically do an inventory of our program specifically, and look at what are some of the gaps, and because I think, you know, these are really great, but there's no way that we can, you know, develop like equity measures that cover every single program in every single state agency. You know, or you know, that would be really wonderful. But I think these, like you mentioned, are kind of holistic aspects of people's lives. But when it comes to specific programs, it's really important to figure out what it is. Like yesterday during the opening, one of the speakers said, you know, there's not one size fits all solutions. Big agencies have different needs from smaller agencies, and yeah, so for us, it's kind of a matter of figuring out where are there disparities in vaccine access, where what are some of the barriers for people to, you know, access vaccines, things like that. So I think it's really important for teams to be specific. And yeah, I just want to echo the previous question. It would be really helpful to be able to share some of this information across state agencies, because equity work can be really time consuming, and the more that we can avoid duplicating efforts and just, you know, collaborate and share information, I think that'll be really beneficial for all of our efforts.
Thank you for that feedback, Felipe. Definitely, when we have some solid guidance, we'll definitely reach out. Love that perspective. I did put my information in the chat. So if you just want to chat, have questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me, or you can reach out to me through Kathy. The last question, please provide suggestions on what would you like to see next time when we come together. You can't submit more than one suggestions. How did the session go? And what would you like for us to do different, or bring a different topic? Yep. If it's available, people would like to see the data, specific measures for each of the 15 determinants, existing dashboards. Timeline for the workshop with the agencies. Running through an example, that's a really good one. Yes, that brings it home, right? Examples to realize how to leverage. Yes. Kat put it in the chat. We loved it. We just want more. Couldn't agree more. We do need to come together in this space and brainstorm and continue the work. Thank you so much. It's 1:28, an hour 28 and roughly 29 minutes. You have been amazing audience. I super appreciated the engagement throughout the workshop. We couldn't do this. None of us can do it in silos. We have to come together, work together, co-create, and do this amazing work, which is, again, a lifelong work. It's not going to stop. It's not going to be finished. Looking forward to working with all of you guys in the long run. Thank you for having me as your host today. Appreciate all of you. Have a good one.